Good evening, everyone. I know people are still arriving, and the conversations are happening that are important to have, and we'll continue to have them later in this reception. But I wanted to say good evening to all of you. I'm Karen Hansen, the Executive Vice President and Provost of the University of Minnesota. I want to welcome all of the alumni, faculty, staff, and friends who are here tonight. I'm really delighted to join you in this evening to formally welcome Garry Jenkins to Minnesota and to introduce him to all of you who have not yet had the pleasure. I would also like to welcome a couple of very special guests, Dean Jenkins' parents, Gary C. and Leslie Jenkins. Many members of the search committee are also here this evening, and I want to say I'm deeply grateful to all of them for the hard work and dedication that brought Dean Jenkins here. Thanks especially to Professor Joan Howland and Dean Eric Schwartz for co-chairing the search. I know I saw them around. And to faculty, staff, and students who took the time to provide invaluable feedback on all the dean candidates. Dean Jenkins quickly rose to the top of the list of candidates. For those of you who've already met him or who have read his resume, I think it's clear why. But I'll take a few moments to highlight some of the reasons. The record showed that Dean Jenkins is an energetic, creative, and collaborative leader and a consensus builder. As Associate Dean for Academic Affairs and the John C. Elam Vorys Thacher Professor of Law at The Ohio State University Moritz College of Law, he worked as part of a dedicated and entrepreneurial team to advance that school in the increasingly challenged environment for law schools and public higher education. He also led that law school's efforts to implement significant curricular reforms and innovations, develop new co-curricular programs, and revitalize branding. Prior to joining the Ohio State faculty in 2004, he was Chief Operating Officer and General Counsel of the Goldman Sachs Foundation, responsible for domestic and international grant-making programs, communications, finance, legal affairs, and investment management for one of the country's largest corporate foundations. Garry earned his JD from Harvard University Law School, where he was editor-in-chief of the Harvard Civil Rights, Civil Liberties Law Review, and he also earned an MPP from Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. To summarize what we saw in Garry's impressive vita and in the interviews and meetings last year, we saw extensive experience as an administrator at a public law school, plus someone who's a scholar of law and public policy, plus someone with a successful tenure as a foundation executive, plus someone with a commitment to diversity. In short, we saw a breadth of experience, strategic acumen, and a collaborative leadership style that will position the law school well for the future. Garry, we are so glad you're here, and we all look forward to seeing what you and your colleagues accomplish in the years ahead. So now I'd like to invite the chair of the Law School Board of Advisors, David Potter, to the podium. David is a partner at Fox Rothschild and was a member of the search committee.
Thank you, Provost. So let's clear one thing up. I'm the immediate past chair of the Board of Advisors. Jay Kim, of course, taking and filling the role much better. For those who don't know the Board of Advisors, and I don't know that there was one when I was in law school 1,000 years ago, the Board of Advisors is a group of alumni who spend their time, whose mission is to really connect the law school to one of its best resources, which is its alumni. And as at that point, the chair of the advisory committee, I was asked by the provost to be one of the two alumni on the search committee. The other alumni was a remarkably talented but relatively obscure alumni named Walter Mondale. One of the interesting side effects of being a member of the search committee, and in fact, it was, other than getting up really early and giving your Saturdays and Sundays away, it was one of my best experiences in the last decade. one of the side effects is I got to be interviewed by somebody that's writing an article on Dean Jenkins. And I thought I would use, because I was a little bit surprised by the interview. It looked like it was a very, I really liked the writer. I think it's for a relatively soft publication. But the first two questions kind of surprised me. And I thought I would use those questions as a way to focus my brief remarks. The first question, after the writer confirmed that indeed I was a member of the search committee, was, so was he your number one pick? And I thought about that, and I thought about all of the danger I could get into, including the fact that I remember signing some blood oath of secrecy and all kinds of other things. But I've been a trial lawyer all my life, and I went with my gut, and I said, speaking only on behalf of myself, actually he was. And then, of course, there's always a consequence. She asked the really hard question, why? And what gets hard about this is we had a remarkable group of candidates. I mean, you heard a bit about Dean Jenkins' accomplishments. I mean, these were people that had it all. I mean, they were brilliant scholars. They were strong leaders. They were accomplished in every way. They would come in and fill the room with their personalities. So here I am now, I've got myself in this box of how am I going to try on a personal level, me only, not speaking for the committee. Why did I come to that conclusion? And I'll give you all the same answer that I gave that writer a couple weeks ago, because I think it's still true. I'm much more of an emotional intelligence person than I am kind of a scholarly person. That's why I'm a trial lawyer. For those of you that hire us, you know that. But really what it was, and I met Garry less than 6 months ago in this very hotel down the hall. That's where we did our airport interviews, is what really got me about him, the way I think of it is authenticity with the right focus. So of course you have to be a brilliant scholar. You have to be a great leader. You have to be able to meet people and make them connect with you right away. But for me, only for me, it was the realness that he has, the fact that you know he's going to wear well, the fact that he's focused on the right thing, the school. He's not focused on his career. He loves challenges, but you can tell that the challenges that he has chosen to fight are things he really cares about. And so that was my answer. So imagine me less than 6 months ago forming all of these conclusions. I think it's fair for this audience to get a second opinion. And so I think the second opinion has to come from somebody that might have known Garry maybe a day or two longer than I have. And that would be the dean of the Francis King Carey School of Law, which I actually had a little bit of time to learn about. So if you have a chance, talk to Dean Tobin about the name and where it came from. But Dean, why don't you join us?
Well, thank you, and thank you all for having me here today, and a special thank you to Provost Hanson and David Potter for inviting me to join you today and being able to celebrate Dean Jenkins. I feel a little bit like the best man at a wedding getting to toast his best friend. You all look a little more sober, though, so my jokes may not be quite as funny. I'm here because Garry is one of my best friends. We grew up in academia together, supporting and encouraging each other along the way, and I am so honored to have the privilege of telling you more about him. I write talks like this all the time. In fact, I started my career writing speeches for a United States Senator. And despite all of this practice, this is one of the toughest tasks I've ever had. I have struggled and procrastinated on this speech. How do I capture how special Garry is and how I think he is absolutely the perfect choice to be dean at Minnesota? As I thought about the speech, a story I have involving former Vice President Mondale kept coming to me. Despite trying to find another story, one that was actually about Garry, I kept coming back to this story. It was because the story captured what I think is so special about Garry. I finally decided that in light of the fact that the law school building is named the Walter F. Mondale Hall, the story was fitting. So let me take you back about 30 years. I was interning for an organization called the National Democratic Institute for International Affairs, and Vice President Mondale was either the chair of the board or a member of the board, I don't remember. While as an intern I was waiting for the board meeting to start, Mr. Mondale was sitting on a table. He was sitting on a table telling me a story. He was swinging his legs back and forth, more like a schoolboy than the former vice president. Now, I was a political junkie, so being in a room and hearing a story from the vice president, that was a big deal. It was kind of like my daughter being allowed to go backstage at a Coldplay concert. Maybe he realized that, but he told a story about campaigning and about a volunteer who was charged with driving him around. I won't repeat the whole story, and maybe you've heard it 100 times, but the moral of the story was that the volunteer was sacrificing tremendously to help him win. He noted that as a politician, you might have a high opinion of yourself, but that the main gist of the story was that that volunteer's sacrifice highlighted that there were a lot of people giving up a lot of time to make him succeed. That this effort wasn't about him, but that he owed a duty to all of these people who were supporting him because they cared about the future of the country. At least that's the moral I took from the story. Mr. Mondale was talking about what today we think of as servant leadership, recognizing that as a leader, it's really not all about you. It's about the people who have put their trust in you. It's about the institution that has given you the privilege of leading it and of making sure it achieves its goals. Garry is that type of leader. For his entire career, Garry has embraced institutions that he is a part of and worked to make them better. He did this for over 7 years at Ohio State as Associate Dean. He has done that both as the president of the Alumni Association for his alma mater and now as the vice chair of the board at Haverford College. Garry embraces organizations and gives his all to help them thrive. Garry and I were both junior faculty members together at Ohio State, and our offices were next door to each other. We helped each other through the trials of being new faculty members and supported each other in everything we did. After I became Associate Dean at Ohio State, the Dean asked Garry and me to create a new leadership program at the school. I like to say that Garry was the brains and I was the brawn. After all, how often do I get to be the brawn? Garry, who had thought and taught about leadership and specifically lawyers as leaders, was an untenured faculty member and was concerned about whether or not he would have the clout to start the program. Besides serving a lot of leaders, I, however, knew nothing about starting a leadership program. But we were a great partnership. Garry took the lead in designing the program, and together we started one of the first leadership programs at any law school in the country. Garry's scholarship and deep thinking about leadership were essential for the success of our program. But I also learned a lot more about Garry during this process, which foreshadowed years of our working together in law school administration, and now his leadership here at Minnesota. So when I was writing this talk, I was trying to think of a theme of how to talk about Garry and what makes him special. My wife vetoed my two ideas. Everything I know about being a dean I learned from Garry, which would be close to true, to a David Letterman's top 10. So Garry, you can thank Lee for the fact that this is tame. The first thing you should know about Garry is that he is extremely purposeful and thoughtful about everything he does. For those of you who have worked with Garry, you'll know what I call the Jenkins pause. It goes something like this. Even when I talk to him on the phone, I sometimes have to ask him if he's still there. Now, when thinking about leadership, we encourage students to think about their own strengths and weaknesses and to work on those weaknesses. Well, mine is listening. I am impatient, and I usually think I have all the answers to all the questions. Except now that I'm dean, I'm not sure that that's true anymore. So I work on listening on a regular basis. So one day I decided I was going to out-listen Garry. It can't be done. After about 2 minutes of silence, I finally cracked. But Garry's ability to listen makes him a fantastic leader. He makes sure that everyone is heard and that he has thought through problems before acting. He works towards consensus. Once he acts, he is confident and clear in the direction that needs to be taken. Especially once we became associate deans together, Garry and I had lunch together at least 3 times a week. Absent those lunches, I probably wouldn't have been dean today at the University of Maryland Francis King College, Carey's School of Law. I am originally from Maryland and worked for a U.S. Senator from Maryland, so the fit for me at Maryland Carey Law was pretty strong. When I received an interview from Maryland to be the dean, Garry turned to me and said, "Okay, now it's time to get to work." I said, "What do you mean? I've had plenty of interviews. How much work could it be?" Garry looked at me and said, "A lot." So at lunch after lunch, Garry grilled me on Maryland, grilled me on my responses to interview questions, and made sure that I had the perfect answer for every question. I have never been that prepared for an interview in my entire life. I am an appellate litigator, or I was an appellate litigator. I was used to moot courts and hard work and preparation, but Garry was going to make sure that I put my absolute best foot forward. Garry, I'm really sorry that I didn't get the chance to get my revenge while you were interviewing at Minnesota. Garry's second famous trait is that he has high expectations. Working with Garry, I learned that I could have higher expectations of others, and by doing so, we could achieve far superior outcomes. My first lesson was in this leadership program. We were trying to create a logo. Garry's experience with Goldman Sachs Foundation ingrained 2 things into Garry. First, brand image is important, so we needed a strong logo for the program. And second, honoring donor wishes was an essential part of our mission. So when we were trying to create the logo, Garry and I were shown a few choices. I say a few, they would say 20. Really, it was only a few. But really, none of them were good enough. The end result, a great logo, is not the essential part of the story. The essential part of the story is that Garry knew that none were good enough, and he insisted on a better product. I, however, was the product of, or you could say an expert in bureaucracy. I thought there was no way we would get a better logo. But sure enough, the final logo was great. Now, I personally think Garry just designed the logo himself, but maybe not. Now, Garry doesn't just have high expectations of himself and his coworkers, he even has high expectations of my parenting. He is always trying to make sure that my kids go to the right schools and have the right opportunities. He's always willing to advocate that I spend more of my time or money on my kids. They obviously love him. He has been recruiting my children to Haverford College since they were old enough to read. But Garry, I am not letting you recruit them to the University of Minnesota, not Maryland. I am not letting you recruit them to the University of Minnesota Law School. Garry also understands how important donors are and how important it is to honor those who support the institution. We never had a meeting or even lunch in the dean's conference room or the student lounge. It was always the Boyd conference room or Lou's Cafe. But I must admit that I'm now on board. At Maryland, we have faculty meetings in the Crowan Guard room, and we eat lunch in Comcast. Garry is also my go-to person for good restaurants, and I'm at a loss without suggestions for new and interesting restaurants. I'm sure he will love having a new city and new places to try. I look forward to returning for a longer visit to enjoy the city with you. Inside tip, Garry hates mayonnaise. Garry is also a whiz for trivia, especially pop culture trivia. My recommendation is never to challenge Garry to a game of Trivial Pursuit. Garry is also a loyal friend with a kind heart. Garry was getting rid of an old TV. It was, however, far better than the old TV my son was using for his PS3. Garry was all too willing to donate the TV to my son. What neither of us realized was that this huge old TV was really, really heavy. I mean, really heavy. It was huge. And did I mention it was really heavy? Now, if you look at Garry and me side to side, you will see that we do not have a career as movers. As we were lifting this heavy TV out of this house, I kept wondering if either of us loved my son this much. We then looked down a flight of stairs outside, and neither of us thought this was going to end well. So Garry and I do what we do best. We problem solved and proceeded to slide the TV down the steps. I'm sure this was a hilarious sight as 2 middle-aged academics were sliding this TV down the steps. I realize that Garry must have really loved my son because I have never seen him before or after attempt to move much of anything. And Garry, just so you know, I learned my lesson. When we moved to Maryland, I took apart the TV so I could load it in my car and take it to the dump. But Garry's biggest trait, and the reason he will make a fantastic dean, is that he cares passionately about people and institutions that he is a part of. I have never doubted that Garry would be there for me, and I have no doubt that he will always be there for you. The University of Minnesota School of Law is known for its high academic standards, its excellent students, its strong faculty, and its deep commitment to training great future lawyers. I can think of no one better to lead this institution as it continues to reach these goals. Garry, congratulations on this new adventure, and thank you again, Provost Hanson, for giving me the honor of telling you all something about my dear friend, Garry Jenkins.
Thank you. Thank you all, alumni and faculty and friends and university and community leaders, for coming tonight, for making me feel so welcome to my new home here at the U and in the Twin Cities for these past few months. Also, of course, a special thank you to Provost Hanson and David Potter and Donald Tobin for your remarks. This is certainly a day to remember, so thank you. The first thing I want to do is to actually just take a moment and soak this in, because this is really something special. And a dear friend of mine who has a lot of experience in higher education said that when you're up at that podium, you want to enjoy the moment, because it's probably the last time you'll be uniformly warmly received, because soon you've got to start saying no. But there are, before I deliver my formal remarks, I just want to say that there are so many people who have brought me here to this place today, and it's certainly impossible to thank them all by name, at least if we want to get out of here at a reasonable hour. But I do want to express my gratitude to my former colleague, my friend and fellow Big Ten dean. The remarks were amazing, and traveling to the Twin Cities literally back and forth in a day is hero's work. We are close friends. As Donald said, we were associate deans together. Before that, though, we were just two faculty colleagues whose offices were next to one another, and I think that it's certainly possible that someone thought that we might be friends and put our offices next to each other, but certainly I don't think anyone would have predicted that we would both move over to the dark side of administration. But having a friend like Donald to help maneuver in academia, to talk about teaching, to discuss ideas in scholarship, to learn the ropes of academic administration, to launch a pioneering program in leadership, any one of those things would be great. And I feel extraordinarily lucky to have done them all with Donald. I also want to thank President Kaler and Provost Hanson for their vision, for their leadership, and their support of this terrific law school. All three of us see the law school contributing to the greatness of the university and adding to an intellectual community of scholars who are able to cross traditional boundaries and make a difference on the pressing challenges, the grand challenges of our time. And at the University of Minnesota, and speaking and getting to know my fellow deans, it's clear that there's an ethos here that interconnectivity is a source of strength, and it's a real privilege and honor to join this community. Of course, I want to thank the search committee, chaired by Dean Eric Schwartz and Professor and Associate Dean Joan Howland, all of its esteemed faculty and staff members and alumni members. I know how much work that they put in, so I want to thank them for their effort and their sound judgment, perhaps. But also, thanks to the faculty, my new faculty colleagues. I'm really, really thrilled to join your ranks. It is a remarkable faculty of deeply committed teachers and scholars of the first order. So I'm so pleased. And of course, every dean has to work closely with his or her board, her school's boards, and I'm incredibly fortunate to have David Potter as immediate past chair and Jay Kim as current chair of the Board of Advisors. The law school and the university are really extraordinarily fortunate to have lawyer leaders like David and Jay as engaged and committed alumni, and I'm really looking forward to working with them and their fellow colleagues. Many of you are here tonight on important initiatives in the future. And finally, I want to say thanks to the law school special events team and the development and alumni relations group for making this event happen, and it's a lovely event, so thank you all. Like many of you, I became a lawyer because I believed that as a lawyer, I could make a difference in society. Time and time again, we see lawyers stepping up to promote a just society. If you think about any important issue today, it's lawyers who are involved, who are at the center. It's lawyers who are prosecuting and defending those involved in police shootings, as well as investigating policing practices that have embroiled our cities. It's lawyers who are addressing the unfolding global refugee crisis. It's lawyers who are working on the cutting edge of figuring out how big data analytics and other innovative uses of personal data can produce tremendous gains and economic value while at the same time not eroding our privacy or undermining cybersecurity and deepening inequality. It's lawyers who are working to improve water in Flint, Michigan. You kind of get the point. Lawyers play a pivotal role in helping our society become its best self. And at the 1L orientation, I reminded our new students that ours is the profession of Jefferson, of Hamilton, of Lincoln, of Thurgood Marshall, of Gandhi, of Mandela, of O'Connor, of Darrow. The point was, what we do matters. And earlier this summer, I reread the excellent autobiography of Justice Sotomayor, who will be speaking to our community as part of the Stein Lecture next month. I also spent a lot of time this summer listening to the cast album of the hit Broadway show Hamilton. And I did happen to have the chance to see it, which was great. But both of those works reminded me, actually, of the power of law and the foundational role of lawyers, who are real people, right, who are everyday flesh and blood people, the way that the important and critical role we have played historically and continue to play in society. And that as a country, we're always working to live up to our ideals. And certainly recent events, whether they be here, Falcon Heights, or Tulsa, or Charlotte, or Baton Rouge, or Dallas, or Orlando, they remind us that there's still a lot of work to be done, but it needs to be done by lawyers. And here at Minnesota Law, we are training the next generation of great lawyer leaders who will be charged with continuing the lawyerly tradition of working for justice, of advancing our institutions. And I think that we have the intellectual and institutional capacity to make a unique difference in the world. As a flagship public law school in the state and one of the top 10 public law schools in the country, Minnesota Law plays an essential role in educating that next generation of great lawyers and producing lawyers who are going to lead and producing lawyers who are going to serve. And we provide access, we provide opportunity to many who would not otherwise be able to attend law school. We instill in graduates a deep commitment to leadership, to service, to the bar. We seek to advance the understanding of law, of legal institutions through innovative teaching and scholarship, and seek to enhance access and justice through engagement in the community. This law school has produced lawyer leaders who have served at the very highest levels of the federal executive branch. Our alumni have served as governors, as ambassadors, as mayors, as federal and state judges, as chief executives of major corporations, founders and executive directors of nonprofits and public interest organizations, senior cabinet officials, partners of leading law firms, members of Congress, of state legislatures, entrepreneurs, influential leaders of the bar, whether they be in large communities, small communities, and we will continue to do that if we stay focused on our mission. And that's why I'm here, and that's why I was attracted to this law school, that I thought this was a place where if we continue to bring the best and brightest, the most diverse students, and connect those amazing students with leading teacher scholars and connect them, plug them into a powerful alumni network, we can make a difference in the world. And that's ultimately what motivates me, what gets me excited. And all law schools that are great have one essential characteristic, and that is great people, right? To be a great law school, you have to have great people. And I think that we have that. We have a brilliant and collegial faculty with a rich and diverse range of intellectual interests. They were recently ranked among the top 15 law faculties for their impact in research. And they're also great teachers as well. More than nearly 40% of the full-time faculty have actually won a teaching award for excellence. We have great students, talented students. I've had the opportunities to engage intellectually and socially with our students, and they're a terrific group. And you should hire them. Last year, we had multiple winners of national moot court and writing competitions. They're terrific. Dedicated staff who do so much, who work so hard, who are focused on creating a really unparalleled student experience. And we have committed alumni. Now, I'm just getting started in this job, but I can already tell you that people really love this law school, and they want to see it thrive. Now, there's no question that this is a moment of significant challenge for law schools around the country, but I honestly believe that Minnesota Law is well positioned to meet today's challenges. And I was attracted to this job for a lot of reasons other than the weather here. It was because of the deep commitment to a public mission and to excellence. It was because the law school sits within an outstanding research university, with rich opportunities for collaboration and interdisciplinary problem solving. Because it's located in this vibrant, thriving metropolitan area. Because it embraces a genuine integration of theory and policy and practice. In fact, more than a by behind us. Ours is one of the oldest, one of the largest, one of the finest clinical programs in the country, providing over 40,000 hours of legal services to the people of Minnesota every year, and more than 40 community outreach events. So my goals as dean are to lead through these exciting and transformative times. Specifically, I want to increase career opportunities for our graduates. I want to keep the law school affordable for students of all incomes, and I want to ensure that our academic program evolves for the 21st century so that it is innovative, it is interdisciplinary, and it's known for its relevance and rigor. So those are certainly my priorities. Now, to do so, we're going to need to leverage our strengths, and I won't kid you, we're also going to need resources. We're going to need support from alumni and from friends. But I have every confidence that this community is up to the challenge. I think that a Minnesota law education prepares students to deliver work of the highest quality from the outset of their careers, to achieve positions of influence throughout the entirety of their careers. And I think that if we put our minds to it and we work together, we can raise the work we do to even higher heights. And that's hard to do because we are already an outstanding institution, but I think any great institution always looks over the horizon, always looks to continue to improve and be better. Now, that work, to achieve those three goals, that work, those investments are going to matter, the investments that we place in those three areas. And if we do that, it's going to matter to our faculty, it's going to matter to our student, but it's also going to matter to the state, it's going to matter to the world. I think it matters to the 22 million non-U.S. citizens living in the U.S. and their family and friends that they don't have to fear wrongful deportation thanks to a landmark victory in the U.S. Supreme Court by a University of Minnesota clinic. I think it matters to the 1 in 52 U.S. adults on probation or parole that the laws and policies governing them are being reformed and influenced by the efforts of one of our great research institutes at this law school. I think it matters that penetrating scholarship produced by our faculty can influence the way international policymakers, scholars, advocates, and open societies think, for example, about women's needs and equality and autonomy in peace-building measures in the developing world. I think it matters because this law school trains and provides the thoughtful, the principled, the resourceful leadership that this country and the world needs. And as we think about the needs that our communities are facing today, facing tomorrow, those needs demand considered, creative answers. And it's graduates from law schools who provide much of that leadership. And today's U of M law students will graduate to become the next generation of lawyer leaders. They're going to make a difference in law, in business, in government, and nonprofits. And I think that we as an institution have to do our modest part to propel the world forward. That's what we do. That's our tradition, and that's the mantle that we take up. So before I close, I just want to take the opportunity to do one more set of thanks, and that is to my family, my parents, Garry and Leslie. As you know, they're here today. They have been so supportive and really instrumental in any accomplishments that I've had in my life. My father was a computer programmer, and my mother was a high school teacher, and it's their lessons of honesty and hard work and perseverance and fairness and teamwork that are always with me. So I want to thank them for being here. I also want to thank in absentia my brother, Chris, and my sister-in-law, Lauren. They couldn't make it from Buffalo, largely because they're caring for my brand new nephew, Jackson. He's adorable. But they all mean so much to me as well. So I guess I'll just say that as I start my deanship, I want you all to know how honored I am to be here, how moved I am to be welcomed into the U community, and I recognize how important Minnesota law is to you, to the community, and to the state. Our law school is an ever-evolving work in progress, and I promise you I'm going to work as hard as I can to make sure that the law school moves forward as a national leader in legal education, as we preserve the legacy of our distinguished past, but continue to be poised for greatness in the future. So I want to thank you. I hope I can count on your support, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of the evening. And for those of you that I haven't had a chance to meet, I hope that we meet either later tonight or in the coming months. Thank you so much.